Let's look at the Cure Bowl, Saturday, December 26th. This game is going to kick off at noon between Coastal Carolina and Liberty. Two favorites of mine this year, two favorites to watch. Um, Coastal Carolina, obviously 11-0, had the Sun Belt Conference championship canceled due to COVID-related issues. So they end the season as the Sun Belt Conference co-champs with Louisiana, and then Liberty at 9-1 was also pushing for that Group of Five spot, New Year's Day spot, up until late in the season when they lost a game at NC State 15-14. When you look at the schedules, only one loss here for both of these teams combined. I did say, and I've said this several times throughout the year, Coastal Carolina, in my opinion, was the most improved team in the FBS this year. One would argue San Jose State would be up there as well, but I felt that Coastal Carolina was the most improved team in the FBS. I've been saying that ever since I watched them 4 games into the season, and then they just continued to run the table and quite honestly handled just about every team that they played, held on against BYU when BYU and Coastal scheduled that impromptu matchup at the end of the year and held on, stopped BYU at the 1-yard line. And so they end the season 11-0. They get to play Liberty in the Cure Bowl. And like I said, Liberty, great year, led by quarterback Malik Willis. And let's just kind of start there. Let's start with the fantasy assets and what we know about each of these teams. Liberty scoring 38 points a game, only giving up 19. Coastal Carolina, very similar. They're scoring 37.5 points a game. They're giving up not quite 20 a game, 18.7, which is fewer than Liberty. And then when you look at the yards, both teams giving up less than 140 on the ground. Coastal giving up a little bit more through the air than Liberty has, giving up just over 200, whereas Liberty comes in at 172. And then offensively, both teams really well balanced. Liberty running for 250 a game, passing for 230, and Coastal Carolina, led by Grayson McCall, they're running for 223 a game, passing for 223 a game. You can't get any more balanced than that. And like I said, both of these teams really, you can credit the quarterback play as the reason for their success. Grayson McCall, 23 passing touchdowns, 6 rushing touchdowns, 29 in total on the season. And then Malik Willis on the Liberty side, 20 passing, 10 rushing, 30 touchdowns on the season this year. So both quarterbacks very similar in style. Malik Willis probably a little bit more, has done a lot more damage with the run game, rushing for 800 yards this year, whereas Grayson McCall has come in at about 473. And the projections here are for both guys to do really well in this game. So I think what's going to happen is this matchup's really going to come down to who's around the quarterbacks and the defense as well. Let's look at the Coastal Carolina side. CJ Maribel, he's really kind of taken off over the second half of the season, has totaled 19 touchdowns this year, has caught 30 passes out of the backfield. He's racked up 220 receiving yards. He's got over 80 rushing. So he's over 1,000 total yards on the season. He is the most complete player in this game, aside from the 2 quarterbacks in this matchup, because when you look at on the Liberty side, it's a little bit of a committee approach around Malik Willis. And we'll start in the backfield where Joshua Mack, Peyton Pickett, Shadra Louis have all had their time in the light this year, have all had their time to shine this year around Malik Willis. And really, it's the running threat of Malik Willis that really makes any 3 of those guys dangerous in the backfield when they're lined up back there. However, we just haven't seen a dominant running back one. And that's to be expected when you have a quarterback that can get around and move around like Malik Willis. He is going to be the main offensive threat. The interesting thing about the Liberty passing game is that they're able to spread it around, unlike Coastal Carolina, who relies primarily on 1 or 2 big targets. Liberty is spread it around. That's what makes the passing game dangerous, whether it's DJ Stubbs, Demario Douglas, Kevin Shea, CJ Yarborough, even Noah Frith. I mean, every single one of those guys has at least 15 receptions. Stubbs leads the team with 33. And then when you look at touchdowns, Stubbs 3, Douglas 3, Shea has 4, Noah Frith a couple of TGs. Yarborough, who really has been banged up and hurt the entire year, has a touchdown. You wonder whether he comes in healthy or even if he plays in this matchup. I actually think he's questionable as well, but I was high on him at the beginning of the year. He'll be a player that you'll want to keep your eyes on heading into the 2021 season. But that's the Liberty offense. It starts and stops with Malik Willis in this game. And I think the Coastal Carolina defense, as long as they're willing to contain, as long as they can contain Malik Willis in this matchup, I think that they will have success defensively. However, easier said than done. There haven't been many teams that have been able to do that this year, but NC State was able to do that. They were able to bottle Malik Willis in that game at NC State, where the Wolfpack won 15-14, held on because of a blocked field goal there at the end of the game. And so I do think that Coastal Carolina's defense, which has been impressive all year. You look at their resume, and I know that there were some easy wins earlier in the year, but at the time, Arkansas State was rolling. They had come off of win against Kansas State. They held Arkansas State to 23 points. They held Coastal Carolina held on to beat Louisiana in Lafayette. Then they beat Georgia Southern by a couple touchdowns. They stomped Georgia State 51-0. They handled South Alabama pretty easily. Then they beat Appalachian State by 11. And that was the impressive, probably signature win for Coastal Carolina, when you knew that they were probably going to end up more than likely in the conference championship game. They beat up on Texas State. They grabbed the game against BYU, won that game 22-14, and then held on with a late rally to win at Troy 42-38 in a game, quite frankly, they could have lost. And so you wonder about their lapse of their enthusiasm and emotion after that big win against BYU the week before. So here we are. We're looking at the bowl game. Both teams have had a few days off to get ready. They play the day after Christmas. And for the most part, I would expect Coastal Carolina to be regrouped, refocused, and really come into this game supercharged. I give them a little bit more of an emotional edge, and here's why. I think when you come into a matchup like Coastal Carolina is right here at 11-0, having one of the best seasons in the history of the school, there's nothing more than those guys going to want to do than to go out and have an undefeated 12-0 season. Whereas Liberty, they lost a couple of games ago. They're coming in 9-1. They're going to come in and I expect Liberty to play well. Anytime you're playing against a team coached by Hugh Freeze, you can expect that your defense is going to be challenged. However, whether or not there are a few things involved, I would think that if any names come up in coaching searches, Hugh Freeze may be the guy. Are there any distractions on his end getting ready for this game? Is Malik Willis signed, sealed, delivered, ready to play in this game? Will he, all of a sudden, will we see the plug pulled on him? That's a big question, because if anybody misses this game, particularly Malik Willis, it totally swings the entire matchup. And so that's the one player that has to make this matchup for Liberty in order for them to have a chance. And so as long as he shows up, they're going to have a fighting chance. Now, we talked about receivers and the depth on the Liberty side, but we didn't really touch Coastal Carolina. They're led by Javon Halai, 52 receptions, 820 yards, 10 touchdowns on the season. He's their leading receiver. Isaiah Likely also has 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was banged up for a little bit most of the second half of the season, but he's returned down the stretch. So he kind of complements highly on the, in that passing game. And so now the Liberty defense has a couple of weapons that they have to kind of look out for. And then Cameron Brown has also contributed with 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. But you're looking at Highly and Likely, CJ Maribel, Grayson McCall. I just think that Coastal Carolina offense is so well-rounded. I think their defense has played solid all year, proved themselves in that matchup against Zach Wilson and BYU. Yeah, they had the letdown against Troy, a little bit of time off, time to recharge the batteries. And I think they go into this bowl game looking to come out 12-0 with an undefeated season. I do think it's going to be a challenge going up against Hugh Freeze and that Liberty offense, particularly Malik Willis, who has been hard for defenses to really match up against all season long. The only defense that was really able to do anything to shut him down was North Carolina State. And I look at Coastal Carolina's defense and North Carolina State's defense, and I say Coastal Carolina does have the defense to be able to bottle and contain Malik Willis. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of defensive game plan they come up with him, because I do not think, even for as good as Liberty's defense has been, statistically, I still think it will be tough for them to bottle up Coastal Carolina and that running game and the versatile passing game, and quite honestly, an offense that is fueled and led by Grayson McCall. He's the magic that makes it work there for the Coastal Carolina side. And really the horses up front, that offensive line was tremendous in that matchup against BYU. And so I just look at Coastal Carolina as being the more well-rounded team. Liberty, a lot more dependent on a particular player in this game, which for me, my pick, that's is why I picked Coastal Carolina. They were a 6-point favorite when I made this video. The total was 61.5. I like Coastal Carolina to not only cover the spread, to win outright, but I like them to cover the spread. And if I had to go one way or the other, I would probably on this one, I would probably lean over. But something tells me that, if we get any news about Malik Willis not playing, I would definitely certainly be on the under in this matchup. And so, that's the one I'm 50-50 on. Give me Coastal Carolina. Give me the points. I mean, let me lay the points, but I'm not so sure about that total. This one might be one of those matchups where we got to wait till game day to see the players and what it looks like and who's involved, and make sure all the players are in play, so to say, for this matchup. But Coastal Carolina -6 is my play, and 61.5 I lean over, but pay attention for updates leading up to that game, because it could easily just as well be an underplay from me as we get closer to kickoff. So that's going to do it for this year's Cure Bowl between Liberty and Coastal Carolina.